Welcome to members and any members of the public, which is quite scarce this evening. So this is Monday, the 5th of February 2024, the meeting of Cabinet. If I could be authorised, please, to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2023 as a correct record of the proceedings. Thank you very much. I may pass that across. Thank you very much. Okay, apologies for absence, Louise.
Apologies received from Councillor McCourt.
Thank you. Are there any additional agenda items, Louise?
No, there are none.
Okay. And are there any urgent decisions?
No, there are none.
Okay. So on disclosure of interests and dispensations, to receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable interests, non-registrable interest in matters of the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the items in question. Catherine, Councillor Field.
Thank you. Yes, I have two. Item 6, the budget's appendixes F and G, referring to council tax reduction schemes. As I'm a member of the Sussex County Council and that affects their budget, then I have, I think it has been called a registrable or other registrable interest now. It was prejudicial. As it's embedded in the whole budget discussion, and as I'm able to vote on the budget, I'll stay but will go when I'm nodded at or forced out when the appropriate moment comes if the item is discussed in detail. And secondly, item 13, I'm a trustee of the Delaware Pavilion.
Right,
also other registrable, and I have to leave.
Thank you for that. Any other declarations? Hazel.
Yeah, thank you. Under 13 also, trustee of the Delaware Pavilion, and also within the, I can't remember which one it is, but Manor Barn as well, and Bexhill Town Council.
Okay, thank you for that. So if we can move into agenda item 6. This is the draft revenue budget 24/25, report of Duncan Ellis, Deputy Chief Executive and 151 Officer. I beg your pardon.
Need to redeclare.
Okay. And if we move on, this is a report that Ash, you're going to put this report forward, and Duncan is there to take any questions should there be any. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is the second phase of the budget setting process and a follow-up report to the medium-term financial strategy that came to Cabinet on the 6th of November last year. We had the member briefing and the budget update on Thursday, the 11th of Jan, and overview and scrutiny considered the report on the 22nd of January 24. The comments are included in Appendix H. So tonight is for Cabinet to review the updated budget projections and to make recommendations for Cabinet to consider on the 26th of Feb when the council tax is set. So some updates since the overview and scrutiny report. So as you can see from paragraph 4 of the report, the position has improved since the report went to overview and scrutiny by 442,000, taking the forecast drawdown from reserves down from 626k to 185k. We've added in an additional 1% to future years' pay awards, which take the provision up from 2% to 3%. This additional cost has been offset by the extra income from the garden bin proposals, the business rate income, and some additional funding support from central government. So some headlines: 24-25 deficit of 0.185 million to be funded from reserves at present. So that's slightly better than the November medium-term projections, which were at 0.453 million. Usable reserve balance is forecast to be 5.2 million by the end of 24-25, but recovering to 8 million by the 31st of March 2028. Current minimum reserve balance level of 5 million is to be reviewed as part of the council tax setting report. Savings and efficiencies and income built into next year of 3.2 million. So that's slightly lower than the medium-term financial strategy projection of 3.4, but still significant. And the challenge next year and in future years will be around its delivery. Capital programme forecast to be around 170 million, but as members will be aware, there are various reviews of the major capital schemes going on at present, and the results of which will be reported as these reviews are completed. We had 694 responses to the budget consultation, so the highest ever response to a budget consultation exercise. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that participated in that consultation. The report also contains proposals around the future council tax reduction scheme and the introduction of empty homes premium from April 24 and second homes premium from April 25. So some additional key points are the budget assumptions remain unchanged apart from the additional 1% to support the staff pay award. The provisional local government funding settlement was roughly as anticipated, but we're anticipating an additional 200,000 following the recent announcements to increase the settlement by 600 million nationally. Overall resources in terms of core spending power have increased by 5.1% for 24-25. And it's important to note that over the 9 years since 2015-2016, the Council's core spending power has only increased by 1 million, which represents an 8% increase, whereas overall national position has seen an increase of nearly 43%, which is mainly targeted at social care. Over 3 million of savings, efficiencies and additional income has been built into the budget next year, but still needs significant work to deliver. Then moving on to the local government funding settlement. So this was received on the 18th of December last year. Single year settlement, again, which doesn't help our medium-term planning. Fair funding and business rates reviews are still no closer, so future funding risk remains. Council tax can be increased by 3% or £5. In total, including the tax base growth, this generates approximately 0.368 million for next year. Still no cap on town and parish councils, but this needs to be kept under review. An additional 600 million was announced recently to further support local government, so national lobbying has worked well, although over 500 million of that is for social care. We've then got the cost pressures reviewed since the November report. So cost pressures have been reviewed and updated but remain. Contractual inflation, so total of 600,000 and 4.5% of that was the waste contract alone. Homelessness, demand-led growth of 800,000, that has tripled in the last 4 years. External audit fees have increased by 70,000 due to a new contract. Staffing costs have increased by 500,000, but also includes provision for a new monitoring officer. And non-pay contractual inflation has been frozen at current levels, so is cash limited. We've then got the Fit for the Future savings programme. So 3.2 million of that has been built into the budget, but we need to continue identifying future savings, incomes and efficiencies, and the work in that space is still ongoing. In terms of reserves, we've got Q3 23-24 budget monitoring report, which is later on in tonight's agenda, and that is projecting use of reserves of 2.7 million in the current financial year, which is 500,000 worse than originally forecast, and this is attributed mainly to temporary accommodation pressures. This obviously has a knock-on effect to the impact of 24-25 and the minimum reserve levels. The balance of 5.2 million by the end of 24-25, but recovering to 8 million, as I said, by 2028. The current minimum reserve balance levels of 5 million are to be reviewed. There are some additional analysis provided in the pack, paragraphs 55 to 61, regarding a recent report which Grant Thornton produced on reserve levels, which provides useful additional context that we should be 3.8 million above even their highest recommendation levels, and increasing in excess to 6.5 above these levels in March 28. Final summary around the capital programme. So an updated capital programme is included in Appendix D. This covers slippage between years and updated forecasts where relevant. They're still subject to ongoing review, as I mentioned earlier, and still currently positioned at around 170 million, which is still very ambitious. There's potential for future additional external funding, which will increase this further. Final summary around the budget consultation. So as I said, highest ever response, 694 responses, and when we compare that to 126 last year. The views on council tax increases, public toilets, grounds maintenance, Delaware Pavilion, concessionary grant, fees and charges, service priorities were all contained within that budget. We also received a petition with 1,800 signatures in regarding the toilets, and in general terms, respondents were supportive of the proposals. Council tax premium proposals for empty homes and second homes are included within the report, and the empty homes premium we would look to introduce from April 24, but for second homes we need to give 1 year's notice for these proposals, so if approved these would not be until April 2025. And lastly, Appendix G contains proposals in relation to next year's council tax reduction scheme. So that is the summary of the report, and if I can hand over to Duncan for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. Is Duncan with us? I can't see him.
He's online.
Ah, he is online. Sorry, Duncan, I didn't see you. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing really to add, apart from to say thank you to Councillor Giawarn for introducing, but that introduction covers the high-level position, so I'm happy to take any more detailed technical questions if anyone's got any. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Duncan, and thank you, Ash, for presenting the report. Are there any questions on the main body of the report, excluding Appendix F and G, which will be discussed after colleagues who have an interest with regard to the County Council? Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not a question. It's really just an acknowledgement. Appendix I, which was the consultation about the cashless proposal for our car parks. I just wanted to acknowledge the 582 people who took the time to respond, because that's also quite significant. And I do empathise with all the comments that were made, and they've all been documented. And there are, I believe, there are some issues that we could, in fact, tweak this slightly, but I will discuss that with Deborah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hazel. Sam, Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think with any budget setting, and particularly in these times that we're in at the moment, I think it's always important to acknowledge the sort of the limits that we've had to, work within as a local government, as an underfunded local government for quite a number of years. I think it's always important when we're making these decisions to focus on what choices there are available, however limited they are. And I think, obviously, national government have quite a few choices that they've made that's led to where we are, but we also have some choices as political representatives, however small. And I think, I want to say thank you to Duncan and Ash and everyone who's worked on this budget, because it's very clear that although there's a lot of unpalatable choices, in any sort of budget where we're having to trim and save money, it's clear that there are still good principles at play here. I think the extra 1% on staff pay, for example, is to be applauded. It's still budgeting for 3% pay rise is not what I'd like to see as an ideal staff pay rise, but it shows that we are trying to value our staff as much as we can within those very strict financial perimeters. And I'll continue speaking on whichever appendix it was, once that comes up.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Nobody else in the... yeah, I was going to invite Councillor Osborne, but I'll just take an outside question, Paul, and I'll come back into you. Councillor Barnes, John?
Yes, again, more of a comment than a question. I too, rather like Councillor Coleman, think the provision for pay is rather more realistic at 3%, and I welcome that. I think we're in extraordinarily difficult financial circumstances, both nationally and locally, and therefore I anticipate whatever happens at the general election, we're going to face a continued period of austerity until we've got the national debt somewhat reduced. My one worry, and I expressed this at Overview and Scrutiny, I want to repeat it here, is with the Grant Thornton report, which I thought was wholly unrealistic. The notion that a district council with the kind of capital programme that we have, where we've just seen an overrun on the Spine Road of several £1 million, to actually not keep at least 1/3 of your annual expenditure in reserve usable seems to me counterintuitive. To think you can actually go down to 10 or even 5% of your spend is actually extraordinary when you think that the recommendation nationally is to parish councils to keep half, to charities to keep half of the annual expenditure in reserve. For us actually to keep only 1/3 in reserve, I think is the barest minimum, and to go any lower I think would be very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Duncan, did you want to make any comments on that at all, please?
Only to say, like I did in ONS, that I agree with John in terms of the minimum reserve levels. I think the Grant Thornton recommendations at the 5 or 10% are low. To be fair to them, it does caveat that report to say people should take into consideration the economic climate and the economic position of the council when you're making those assessments. But hopefully I've demonstrated within the table at paragraph 58 how much we are above even their higher level. So they were recommending at least 10%. You can see for next year, we're almost £3.8 million above their minimum recommended level. And by the time we get through to March 28, that increases to £6.5 million above their level. So yes, I agree. I think they're too low. I think there's too much risk involved with the capital programme and various other things at the moment to really go much below 4 or 5 million. So to be thinking of more like 1.4, 1.5 doesn't sit well with me. But I just thought it provided some helpful context for people. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan, for those comments. Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. In the matter of reserves, I think it's very interesting and quite clearly a prudent approach is better. But I think we need to see this in the context of the government, the central government, saying that councils have far too much money on reserves and they should be spending those reserves to balance their budgets. So I think you can have it one way or the other, but I think we're actually at the moment bound by what the government is telling us to do, which is spend them.
Yeah, point noted. Councillor Paul Osborne, Chair of Scrutiny. Thank you for your work at the committee recently, Paul.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, Chairman. I think Ash has covered off most of what we come up with at Scrutiny, which, to be honest, wasn't a lot. But I think one thing I should mention that both the members for Ryan Winchelsea had a concern over the level of funding to the Dula War, which is just around about £500,000 mark. I did, they sort of questioned should any cuts be taken up by the Dula War as well. I explained to them that when I first joined the council back in '99, this council's subsidy to the Dula War was around about £1 million. And that was reduced down, I think in about 2002, 2003 to £500,000, where it's sat for best part of, more than 20 years, which has ultimately saved us £10 million. And it hasn't really cost us any more. So there's been no inflation on that. Whether that's sort of satisfied them or not, I don't know, but I think it's a point worth making. The other one that is mentioned was the second homes, doubling of council tax on second homes, and we have to give a year's notice if we plan to do that to the government. So if we want to do that, we can take that, has to be told, I think Ash mentioned it, from April this year to implements next year. And one thing I've sort of always thought about, we back in autumn, I think it was of last year, we had a member briefing on tourism, and we were told that we have some 540,000 overnight stays in Rother. Now you could argue, well, should we not be going a tourist tax? I've just paid a tourist tax in Switzerland, 4 Swiss francs a night. Didn't stop me going. That would bring in roughly £1.1 million. That could pay for the £500,000 could go to the Dula War. The other 500,000 could go to the toilets and public conveniences, keeping them nice and tidy. And £100,000 could go to advertising tourists to come and visit us. So, is that a route? Is that something worth looking at? I don't know. Hotel and Caterers associations across the district probably have a fit. But, I walk past the George Hotel pretty much every Saturday morning, whatever time of year. The restaurant is full of people having their breakfast, and they're paying anywhere between probably 150 and 250 quid a night. Another £2 ain't going to stop them, is it? To be honest. So it's just a thought. I thought I'd put it out there. Thank you much.
I think it's a reasonable thought, and perhaps I could just ask Ben to come back quickly on that, and it may be something that we can put forward to explore what the mechanics of such an arrangement are. Ben.
I'm just quoting from a very quick Google search from the House of Commons Library that suggests that in England it's neither the central government nor local councils have the power to introduce a tourist tax. Primary legislation would be required across the UK to do this, and the government has stated in September 2023 that it has no plans to do so. So the answer is we are not empowered locally to do this.
Dare I say, perhaps a change of government that might change, but then I might get drummed up.
Just taking that idea forward. I think we've got to where we wanted to be on this from the point of view of excluding items. Just remind me again, it's items F and G. So I think we really want a proposal for the budget as it stands, and then we can deal with those things once Catherine and Catherine, just Catherine. Christine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say what a really, really good piece of work this has been. Duncan has provided a sort of first-class service, I think, to the authority, and we should thank him for putting us on the right track, I think, towards balancing the books. I'd also like to thank my coalition colleagues for coming up with some really good proposals and for working together to enable a budget, I think, that we can all agree with. So I'm not sure if it's been proposed, but I'm happy to second the report.
Yeah, okay. And we can vote on the budget as it stands. All those in favour, that's fine. And we can then move on with items, whatever I mentioned, Appendix F and G. Yes, there has been a significant amount of work involved in this in the run-up to the Christmas period, where people were not available. Duncan has been quite ill with COVID, and how he's achieved all of this is obviously something to do with the Norfolk Air. I think there must be something else there, Duncan, but I know how difficult it has been. I know you've been well supported by your team, and thank you, Ash, also for the support you've been able to extend to Duncan in getting this report together. It is a collaborative effort, officers and members, in actually bringing this very complex bit of budget reporting together, so thank you very much indeed. We can then move on to the... we voted on that, have we? All those in favour? Yes, I think we did, didn't we? We did.
Well, yeah, we did the budget, but we haven't... Yeah, so F and G, which is...
F and G, which we can now...
it's recommendations 4 and 5.
Yeah, it's recommendations 4 and 5, I'm reliably told. Okay. Members that would wish to make any comments? Sam?
Thank you, Chair. I'll save my stump speech on council tax reduction policies for full council, because I'm sure there'll be some discussion there if it comes up, which I'm sure it will. But I think as a councillor who I don't think it's any secret has been campaigning for the return of the full council tax reduction scheme since I became a councillor. It was in my first election leaflet that I delivered in 2019, in fact. And I'm really delighted to see this finally in the budget. And I'm, so a big thank you to officers and councillors. I know we've always said that when we can do it, we will, because I think there is a moral argument that if this cap wasn't in place, this a poor tax, if you like, and we were looking at it now as a possible addition to increase our financial savings, we wouldn't look at it twice. We would not put an additional 20% responsibility on the poorest residents in our society, because I think we all understand, especially with the work we've done on the socio-economic duty and on the anti-poverty strategy and things, that actually by asking those who don't have enough money to live comfortably to buck up and pay more to keep the council afloat, by doing that, actually we're not saving money, we're actually costing the council money, because those people are going to get into further poverty. They're going to get into debt. We're going to have to try and recover council tax that isn't there because you can't get blood out of a stone. It's going to give them increased risk of homelessness and rough sleeping that then ends up impacting that side of our services. So I think I'm really proud of this sort of approach of actually saying, let's ask people to pay what they can afford, because we all know the council tax system's not totally fair in that the bandings aren't always lined up with people's incomes. It's not income related like income tax. And so I think this just fixes that problem with those who are at the knob end of the cost of living. And I think, it's just us in Eastbourne who still have the cap in East Sussex. Hopefully Eastbourne will follow us in getting rid of it, because I think it's not something that is palatable in this day and age when people are struggling so much. And I'm really proud to see that we're passing it as a sort of progressive administration. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thank you for those comments. Sam, are there any other members that wanted to make a comment? No? Fine. So we can propose this as a separate item. Proposed by Councillor Jowan and seconded by Councillor Bayliss. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. And then the second item that we need to is, just remind me...
it's item 4, so it's the premiums, the local council tax. So it's appendix F.
F.
Yeah. And it's recommendation 4.
And it's recommendation 4. And it's proposal... this is the empty homes? Yes. Yeah. So it's proposal 4, which is second homes, which is on the papers in front of you. I think, is there someone that's going to propose that and second that? Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Christine. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. So I think we've now dealt with agenda item 6, and we can move forward. Thank you very much, Duncan, for joining us this evening.
Councillor Field.
Yes. And are you improved, Duncan? Your health?
I am, Chair, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not coughing continually, so yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Right. Key performance indicators. This is the report of Anna Evitt, our Corporate Programme Risk and Improvement Manager. The floor is yours, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try and speak loud enough for everyone online to hear me today. So this is to consider the recommendations arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 22nd of January. Members had asked us to consider some additional KPIs for the climate strategy, and that has been included. We've got one for that. Officers had also recommended some minor changes to the planning KPIs. Two very small amendments to revenues and benefits, just with the addition of a couple of words. A reduction in the customer services KPIs to focus on the two most important ones, which includes the channel shift towards our digital offer. And what will back that up, though, is some contextual information, which will be provided in the main body of the ongoing performance reports about numbers of calls offered and the speed of answering and how long people are hanging on and things like that. And there was an additional one for housing, which is the average weeks a household was in temporary accommodation. Previously, there wasn't a target for that, but we've included a target for that one. So that really are the highlights and the changes for the KPIs for the year 24-25 compared with last year. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Anna. There are questions. Catherine, Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. It's not a question, it's a comment, really. Just to say that I'm very pleased that we now have KPIs for the climate strategy on this list. I think they are the right ones, but I would hope that as we work through the new climate strategy, there are more targets that become apparent and need monitoring, if only to declare that we are on target, because I think that really concerns the public, that we don't appear to be doing. We are doing as much as some people think we should be. So I think having a really comprehensive strategy for monitoring the KPIs on the climate strategy is a good thing. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Osborne, Paul, did you have any comments? Because I know that the Scrutiny Committee came forward with one or two proposals, and we would thank them very much for the work they put in on that evening.
Yeah, no, nothing much to add really from the officers' point of view. We were very happy with the position as it is. No, I think Anna's done everything we wanted, basically. Thank you, Chair.
As I would expect from Anna. So we're going to move this report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barnes, I beg your pardon. John?
Yes, I welcome, Leader, the fact that we're getting the KPIs now, the ones that really we can influence, which is a measure of our performance. There was one, though, that attracted my attention at Overview and Scrutiny. I see it's remained the same coming through to you, and it still worries me. It's on page 148, and it's the income from all assets. I would expect that to go up year on year. I'm not sure really what is comprised and what isn't comprised, and perhaps that could be advised to us before council. But it does seem very odd that if this includes rental income, for example, that we're not pushing up rents at all. If it includes car park income, we clearly are raising car park income. And if this is about income from property, again, I would have expected, given what is going on, that really at least this should rise by inflation. So it seems to me very odd we're setting the same target as 23-24, and I would ask that that's looked at.
Thank you, John. I think there's a point. Now, whether or not Ben wants to respond on this, if that's okay with you, Anna. Ben Hook, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So, I mean, the issue with the straight inflationary increase is obviously that a number of our properties will be on periodic increases within their rent, so that may be 5 or 10 yearly rent reviews. So it's not easy enough to say that this many properties will go up by this amount every year. So just applying a straight up inflationary increase on that, wouldn't necessarily be deliverable in that regard. I would say that we are in the process. We will very soon be in the process of sort of commissioning our asset management strategy, which I think will give us a much clearer picture of where we're taking our asset portfolio and the best way to extract additional income from that or reduce the size of it dependent on what is the best approach. I think waiting for the outcome of that to then set any future increases in that target is probably the most sensible solution, because that way we can do it on data rather than sort of a sort of generic application of an increase. What I would say is that estates income doesn't include things like parking charge income, and that all comes in through fees and charges into a separate heading.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ben. Anna, did you want to add anything to Ben's comments?
Only just to reflect the minutes of the committee, and that the Section 151 officer will keep the matter under review.
Sorry about that. I'm sort of getting a nod there. Did you want to add something to that now, Terry, and then please?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to comment on the customer services KPIs. And I think, yes, the reduction in the number, but to focus on the key performance areas for digitisation. Everything we're doing within customer service and to implement AI systems is giving us better visibility all round. So the fact that we're moving the KPIs doesn't mean we're not looking. We can look at customer service in more detail than we've ever been able to before. But I think it is very important to make sure that we do look at the way we're going and make sure that every move we take towards a more digital channel, we take the residents with us, and we make sure that they do not feel that we're insulating ourselves. They feel, as we feel, that we're going to get better visibility. So I'm very pleased to see that in there.
I would concur with that. Paul?
Yeah, just to quickly confirm, Councillor Barnes did raise the issue of the estates income, but as Anna said, the minute on page 153, item 5, estates, says to be kept under review by Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 officer, so that satisfies me. And obviously, we at Scrutiny will be looking at this every few months, so if that doesn't move, I'm sure Councillor Barnes will mention it.
I'm sure he will. But, for me, these are more meaningful targets, and I can get my head around them. Previously, I was never quite sure, but I think now that we've sort of simplified this process but got them very, very accurate, I think it's a far better way of monitoring where we are. So thank you for all your work that's done on that, Anna. And if we're going to move that report, I think it's Ash again. Thank you, Ash. And there's a second for that. Councillor Byrne, thank you, Terry. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Are you going to stay with us, Anna, or do you want to... Yeah, OK, by all means. Jolly good. Agenda item 9, I believe, is it? Or 8? 8. OK. This is the reference from overview and scrutiny, new housing allocations policy. And this is Joe's report. Yes, and is Caroline going to present it? Nice to see you, Caroline, and thank you for giving up your evening to join us.
So this report is to consider the recommendations that arose from when it was examined overview and scrutiny on the 22nd of January, looking at the proposed new allegations policy following the consultation that we carried out in June. Just as a quick reminder, because it's been some time since we last brought it, the main changes that we were looking at was introducing a new emergency housing need banding to try and give the most assistance to those in the highest priority, where we thought social housing was the only suitable option, and that everything else would continue as it is as a choice on a choice-based lettings start type of system. There was a couple of other major changes. The removal of the eligibility to join the register for those who weren't resident in the district, but with a very robust set of exemptions to look at where we did have a genuine need to move. And the introduction of having to have an actual housing need to be able to join the housing register, again, to ensure that resources are used in the best way, and to encourage people to accept, certainly through the homelessness path, private rented tenancies by allowing them to remain on the housing register where they've been offered one in that situation. And there were a few minor changes to things like the saving and income threshold to sort of bring it in line with the universal credit thresholds. We also, following the consultation, we actually changed that threshold. We made it a bit higher in terms of what savings would be allowed, and therefore to give people a greater opportunity to join. Consultation took into account all the major changes and asked about every single one, and in general, the consultation, which ran from July to September, received quite a small number of responses, really, 111, but we were happy that we got a few responses from some of the voluntary organisations, and the parish council responses were really good as well, and as well as a couple of other public sector services and local councils. The responses in general were really positive, and they supported the majority of the proposed changes, and particularly the public were in support of all the major changes. And there were a couple of, as I said, very small changes around the housing debt, savings threshold, and also the local connection criteria to take into account Gypsy and Travellers' specific needs. So the recommendation would be to approve and adopt the policy, and delegated authority be granted to the head of housing in conjunction with the portfolio holder to adopt the policy at the point of the implementation period, and then to make any minor changes, again in consultation with the portfolio holder.
Thank you, Caroline. The lead for housing is not here this evening. Unfortunately, he's unwell, but he had indicated that he was very comfortable with this report. And I'm sure this had feedback on that, Joe. Am I right in saying that the last time this was 2015?
Yeah, the current policy.
The current policy, 2015, which then got caught up in COVID, 2019.
There's a 2014 policy, which is the one we're currently using. There was one that was consulted on, I think, 29. Well, it was around 2019, and then it got stopped by COVID. So this overhauled it totally because there were quite a lot of changes in the interim.
So it has brought forward, historical work that we needed to be up to speed on it. So thank you very much indeed for all the work that's been put in on this, and it's giving us an up-to-date position, which I think is absolutely vital. Are there any questions of Caroline or any comments that anyone would wish to make? Rory isn't here, but I'll invite Councillor Osborne-Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as the authors sat right next to me, I won't say anything nasty, and there isn't anything nasty to say, because we all decided this was an excellent bit of work, especially with covering off the sort of local connection, which is always, out in the sticks where I am. It's always a complaint that people from outside the area are moving in and taking the houses that the youngsters can't have. So bits like that have all been covered off, and no, we thought it was excellent. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other member would make a comment? Councillor Terry Byrne.
Thanks, Chairman. In the absence of Councillor McCourt, I think housing needs are a bit of a shifting sand, and this really does bring us up to date with our perception of housing need, and the allocations policy is really now in tune with as I say, with the need that we're finding nowadays. Probably quite changed since 2015, but I'm very happy with this report, and I'm sure Councillor McCourt is as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to second the report and sort of say I think this is really important and really useful bit of work to bring us up to date, to make sure that we're being as effective as we can be as a council in housing the right people, at the right need, and not giving people on the other end of things false hope that there is a chance that they can get housing where actually, I mean, to be honest, there are so many people in front of them that whose needs are greater, and I think this just narrows our focus to make sure we can be as effective as we can be. But let's all long for the day when anyone who comes to us needing a house can be given one rather than put on a list. That day may come. It may not. In the meantime.
Joe, was there any comment that you wish to make at all, as it was sort of your report but delivered by Caroline? Is there anything you would add to it, please?
Only to commend the report and the policy that Caroline has led, and it's going to be a real, excuse me, it's a really important tool. It's one of those documents that may not inspire people particularly, but it's a really key document in terms of managing to facilitate a reduction in temporary accommodation numbers and a prevention of homelessness. So, yeah, thank you to everyone involved.
Okay, someone can move that report, Councillor Byrne, and second it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
I was just going to add also.
Add something, do you?
Yes, that the intention now going forward is to try and review it every year to make sure that things are obviously as they should be legally, but also to see how things are working and be able to. We've sort of structured it in a way that if things need to be changed, they can be, and we're not going to stick to the policy just for the sake of having drafted it and taken it all the way through. But yeah, that's the intention. We'll try and pass that information back, I think.
So policy won't be on the shelf getting dust or growing hairs, and we have a jolly close look at it as and when there's a need to, which I think is very important. Where did we get to? Terry moved. Yeah, Sam was second. Those in favour? That's unanimous. And thank you very much, Joe and Caroline and your team for bringing this together. We now move on to item 9. Yeah, okay. Agenda item 9, Duncan's report, revenue budget and capital programme monitoring as at Q3. Duncan disappeared, or Ash is going to move this report forward. Thank you, Ashley.
Aren't you lucky you've got me again? So this report covers the budget monitoring for both the revenue and capital budgets up to the 31st of December and covers the first 3 quarters of the financial year. So this report asks members to note that the forecast outturn for 23-24 financial year and recommends updates to the capital programme as well. So some headlines on the revenue position. So the high-level position and forecasts are contained within Appendix A. So that's the general fund summary, covered in more detail by the first sections of the report up to paragraph 13. The forecast outturn for 23-24 is based on the position as at 31st of December 23 and indicates a deficit position of 2.7 million at 31st of March 24 against a budgeted deficit of 2.2. So we have a variance of 500,000. This has improved slightly since the Q2 report by around 0.2 million, however. So key issues to note since the previous report. So the forecast outturn is 500k worse than anticipated compared to the original budget, 23-24. The original planned use of reserves of 2.2 million. And with this additional 500k, the potential drawdown would be 2.7 billion. On the capital position, the highest level position and forecast is contained within Appendix B and covered more in paragraphs 14 to 17. So the draft capital outturn is currently projected to be around 20 million by the end of the year, compared with the most recent forecast of 28 million. However, as Cabinet will be aware, we are undertaking a fundamental review of the capital schemes, which will ultimately mean that more slippage in the capital programme as we take a step back and consider the best options for the future. This intentional delay in capital spending is having a positive impact on the Council's treasury position, both in terms of savings from borrowing, but also through our investment income as the base rate continues to increase and the team focus more on our treasury activities. We're currently expecting the net impact of these changes to deliver additional income and savings of around 1.1 million through the Treasury management activities. Paragraphs 15 to 16 have the capital movements since the last report. Then moving on to council tax and NNDR. So compared to last year, the collection rates are almost identical for council tax, but slightly down by around 1.2% for business rates. So these have held up well, considering, despite the squeeze on finances following the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. The current economic situation may well lead to a decline in future collection rates, which will have an adverse impact on the income that we collect, but we'll continue to monitor this as we're not seeing that yet. In conclusion then, the forecast outturn at Q3 is at a deficit of 2.7 million, which is nearly $500,000 higher than the approved plan of use of reserves. Officers will continue to work closely with members to reduce areas of overspend and the impact on reserves over the coming months. We continue to face ongoing challenges in terms of the budget pressures, particularly around temporary accommodation costs. Ongoing review of the capital programme and proposed updates should be noted and agreed, and a positive position in terms of Treasury investment work is being undertaken. And if I can hand over to Duncan for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ash. Duncan's still with us. Are there any questions, please? Just got away lightly this time, Duncan. Oh, there's a Hazel. I do beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 17, the capital programme forecast outturn. We've got all the capital projects. The Beeching Road Hotel and Food Store development. It says this scheme is not going to go ahead in its current format, and alternatives are being reviewed by external consultants. I just was curious as to what the time frame of that was and what the cost was.
I'm sure Ben can respond to that, or is it somebody? Oh, Joe's up there to respond. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. And apologies, Councillor, for I didn't respond to your question, did I, about on this very subject earlier. We have a consultant completing a review of the whole programme, whole capital programme, and so part of the his work is of course looking at this prospective project. We do also have an agent employed to support our engagement with the various commercial entities that are interested in developing in the site. So the time frame is imminent, but the market forces, as I'm sure you're aware, have been really challenging of late. So the whole thing has had to be reviewed a number of times. But Lloyd Exley is our development manager now and has come in an interim position. And in the next 6 to 12 months, should have completed a review of the capital programme and development projects more specifically, so that we can support a way forward that's more sustainable over the longer term and can start to deliver the outcomes I know members are keen to see.
Does that cover off the question? That's excellent. Thank you, Joe. Where are we? We have this report was for. Excuse me a second. Effectively, this was to be noted, I believe. Yeah. And then the recommendation to Council that the change to the capital programme budget as set out in paragraph 16 be approved. Yep. So all those which I think going to propose that? Somebody going to propose that? No, Ash is going to propose that. Someone's going to second that. You've got a question? No, I was going to vote. Oh, sorry. Goodness me. Seconded. Right. Okay. So those in favour. That's excellent. Thank you, Duncan and Ash, for bringing this report together. And I think that we know that this review is overdue. It's one of these pieces of work that we've been looking at for some little while. And with the change of staff, we just needed to make sure that we get this completed within an appropriate period of time. Okay. Are you going to stay with us, Joe and Anna, or are you going? Yes. by all means, you're very welcome to. Yep, okay. So we move on to item 10. Is that right now, Lorna?
Yes.
Okay, that's the local enforcement plan. This is Kemi's report as development manager, and with Ben Hook, director of place and climate, and it's under the cabinet lead of Teresa Colleen. Who's going to be putting this forward? Ben, Kemi?
Kemi?
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce it.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave that with you then, Kemi, to introduce, and I'm sure Teresa may want to make some comments. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. This report is essentially a review of the previous local enforcement plan. It does not in any sense or way diminish the information contained in the previous plan that it seeks to replace. It's just making it clearer in terms of what we would do given the limited resource we have within the team. And it's essentially a document that's been it's been informed by officers. We've gone through what we've got before, and we've looked at how we operate currently and make that clearer in that document. And yes, thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to make any comments? Catherine.
Yes, thank you. I have several, actually. First of all, the matrix at the end says there is no environmental impact on this report. I think anything to do with planning or enforcement thereof has a huge potential to have an environmental impact. Is thing one. It would have been really helpful when talking about this report if the paragraphs had been numbered, which they're not. So forgive me if I'm sort of ploughing through. There's an awful lot of mentions of the word expedient in here, with no real definition of what expedient might mean in the context in which it is mentioned when it is, which could lead the reader to believe that actually it was just a really good thing to hide behind. It's not expedient, councillor. It's not expedient, member of the public. I don't think that answers a lot of the questions that certainly come up in parish council meetings I attend, where the use of the word expedient is not at all popular. It talks about listed buildings and what you can and can't do in them, and when you've committed a breach. It has been my experience that many owners of listed buildings think, I own the building, therefore I can do what I please because it's mine. I think it would be ever so helpful if on the sale of a listed building, the purchaser was given, a one-size Survey 4 type guide saying it's a listed building, you need permission if you're altering this, and this. And people don't understand and they make mistakes accidentally, really. There's a bit in here about stop notices, and it's not clear if the stop notice policy is a question of law or just our policy. It says stop notices can prohibit any or all of the activities comprising the alleged breach or breaches. So is that the law or is that our policy? And it doesn't say, and perhaps we're not ever going to do it, which could be a mistake, that we would issue a stop notice just when something's happening before it becomes a breach. For example, the arrival of mobile homes on a site where they perhaps might not have permission to be. And if the stop notice is not issued at the time, we go on to have an awful lot of problems thereafter for many years, has been my experience. It says that we don't prosecute if there's no real chance of success. And I just wondered, who decides that? Is it our legal team, or do we send the papers to the CPS and let them decide? And finally, the flowchart in Appendix 1 doesn't have any kind of timescale on it that I can see. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to respond to that, Kemi? Were you able to pick up those points?
Thank you, Chairman. I can try to explain some of them. In terms of the paragraphs, yes, that can be included. We've sort of, in coming up with this sort of concise report or plan itself, we've sort of reviewed what other district councils and some other local authorities have got in their documents and how they are writing their documents, because what we felt with the old one was too prescriptive, and we felt we needed to be a bit more not too restrictive or prescriptive in what we would or want to do, because we have to be guided by the resource we've got, which is just 3.5 members of staff that I've got to deal with all this work. So it's one of those things that we have looked at what we would do and how we act at the moment, and we have put it in there that this is how we would operate going forward. In terms of listed building, yes, we do investigate listed building, and I'm not sure how we will put a guide out to future purchasers of listed buildings to say this is what they can do and what they can do, because what they can do with a listed building depends on the listing of that building. So there are certain things that they might be able to do internally if the internal plan form of the building itself is not what the protection or the listing is about. So it would be a bit unrealistic to put a broad or certain or different information in one space about different types of listing that we've got out there. In terms of the stop notices and the clarity on that, that can be expanded on, but we can serve stop notices at the same time when we investigate a breach and we think it's going to carry on, or we feel it is expedient to take enforcement action, which we have done recently. We've issued a stop notice and enforcement notice at the same time, so we've been able to do that. And I think that was the last one. That was the last bit of that.
Okay, thank you, Kemi. If I can just invite Ben Hook, please, Ben.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's really important to note in this what we've tried to do is develop an enforcement plan that's broadly in line with the resources available to us to undertake that enforcement. I would say that the 3.5 members of staff that Kemi mentions is actually 1 member of staff more than is budgeted for, and we have been trying to supplement that through additional income that we generate through the planning department. But one of those members of staff is not a permanent member of the team, and is only sort of there by virtue of the fact that we've managed to generate additional income into the planning service to fund that additional enforcement. So it is precarious in terms of that. I would say the new policy is broadly in line with our partner authorities. There's no substantive difference between the way that we undertake our approach versus someone like Wealden. What I would say is, I know they have a much stronger reputation in terms of taking enforcement action. That tends to be at the very end of the process, than rather than taking in a prosecution action, they will undertake sort of a stop position which is they just choose a slightly different method of enforcing that, relying on the courts to help enforce that, which is a much more expensive approach. It's something that we can review, and the new policy does not prohibit that approach. But that's always done at the end. I think there's a sort of misconception about, in terms of the amount of resource and effort it takes to issue either a stop notice or an enforcement notice. It takes approximately 1 member of the enforcement team an entire week of work to prepare all the necessary documents to issue an enforcement notice. They have a caseload of about 100 cases each. So I think it's really about making sure that we give ourselves room for interpretation in terms of the nuances of a case, in terms of the public interest, and I mean that in its broadest term, in a particular enforcement, and in the environmental impact, and allowing officers to take that sort of professional judgment based on the specific circumstances of that case as to what is the most appropriate action. That does not mean it should not be subject to scrutiny, and that the local members should be contacting us and having those discussions with the enforcement team to discuss the potential options on any given enforcement activity. And we actively encourage that, and I know that the team work hard with local ward members to try and either explain rationales or reasoning, or to work up different approaches. So I think it's just about the policy itself is there to provide broad guidelines to what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't prioritise. But I think if we make it too tight, we could be putting ourselves into a position where our resources can't match the levels of service that we seek to provide within that policy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, for that degree of clarity on points. Catherine.
Yes, just two things. The question about who decides whether it goes to prosecution or not, us or the CPS, wasn't answered. And this is the first time I have been aware that we have a difference between policy and guidelines, particularly when those guidelines are called policy.
Okay, so we take enforcement action. It's not the part of the CPS to undertake prosecutions. It's us as a prosecuting authority that undertake that. So it's our decision. And in terms of, yes, you're right, it's not guidelines, it's policy.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes. John?
Yes, I have to agree with Councillor Field. It does seem to me the use of the word expedient, which runs through all my correspondence with the enforcement team. It's a very woolly term, and it's not always clear why it's expedient to postpone action. And we now have a reputation for postponing action. This is unfortunate because maintaining the reputation of our planning system does depend on effective enforcement. And one good prosecution, frankly, would do us a lot of good because at the moment there's an increasing number in the AONB of structures appearing in ancient woodland that should not be there, and people living in them. And we really do need, I think, to look again whether we shouldn't use specialist solicitors who can charge not only for their own time, but can charge for our own officers' time, which might help Kemi on the revenue side. If we use specialist solicitors and we had some successful prosecutions, I think that would actually ease Kemi's task. I have a lot of sympathy with the shortage of manpower or womanpower, but we need, therefore, to make cases pay. And our officer time should be claimable if we use solicitors who really know what they're doing. I fear one or two of our recent prosecutions have not been quite as well handled as I would have wished. And again, the people who are dodging enforcement or occasionally being found of enforcement are very adept at pretending to be mentally ill or physically ill, and somehow we never manage to successfully call them out. Listed buildings are a particular problem on my patch. There is one building in Burwash that has been totally gutted. That really is a criminal offence. Indeed, in Wealdon, there was a very successful criminal prosecution. Here we have still to move to effective enforcement action. So I have to say, I have a lot of sympathy with Kemi, but I think we could actually, with one or two effective prosecutions, revolutionise the whole setup. I think the other Councillor Barnes may wish to add something.
No, sorry, I'm just coming in to say I totally agree with that. I mean, the word expedient was actually used 7 times in that report.
Okay, I think the point's been made, and thank you, John, for your comments, and I'm sure that Kemi and Ben will go away with those and look at those in some way, shape or form and identify going forward. Christine, Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I again sympathise with Kemi. I think it's important to set out the position. Looking at the resources that you've got and what can actually be achieved by that, I think that, that is a good thing. But I'm going to use this opportunity to get on to one of my hobby horses, which is the town centre conservation area, and the fact that we don't find it expedient to chase up or enforce when people replace windows with non-compliant UPVC windows, which I think look ugly and are out of place in the conservation area. But we don't follow through with enforcement, and yet a neighbour who takes takes their responsibilities really seriously, puts in a planning application, it's turned down and refused, they go on appeal, it's turned down and refused. And it just seems to me to be absolutely unfair, an unfair position. Now, it might be that it is expedient not to prosecute because, in the scheme of things, my enforcement issue in the town centre is small compared to, say, something on Councillor Barnes's, where he's got real problems with a listed building or somebody building something in Woodland. But I would like to see sort of a pathway, if you like, towards how we get to a position where it's actually dealt with properly right across the board. How many officers do we need? Are we ever going to get there? And if we're never going to get there, can we please look again at the stuff we're trying to enforce to see whether we can't come to a better position that reflects public opinion. So basically, I'm asking for a review of the conservation area and the rules around some of the buildings. We don't have listed buildings as such in the conservation. I don't think. In fact, actually, probably the Delaware Pavilion is just outside it, and obviously isn't of the era that we're trying to protect, the Edwardian era we're trying to protect. But as I say, it is one of my hobby horses, but I'm not going to miss up the opportunity to restate my position.
Oh, I wouldn't have expected you to, Christine. Councillor Vicky Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I cannot be the only councillor who constantly receives, often from the same resident, emails about what they see as a breach of planning and requesting us to seek enforcement action. Reading this document through, I wonder if our key objectives of the planning enforcement team, which is on page 289, the key objective says to maintain public confidence in the planning system. I would like it to say increase public confidence in planning system. But again, looking at page 294, where it says what happens if I carry out work without planning permission, I just wonder if this is firm enough. Reading it, it seems to be full of really woolly, with lots of little loopholes that residents can wheedle their way out of. And I really don't feel it does stress the importance and the results of enforcement. So, for example, in Battle, there's been an enforcement against a fence in Senlac Gardens that has been there almost as long as I've been a councillor, and there still hasn't been any action on it at all. I do agree with Councillor Field, however, about regarding the sentence, and I'm afraid I can't find it on my document, that we don't enforce if we don't have a chance to win. I mean, that seems to me, it's a get-out-of-jail card free to our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those points. I'm sure they will be noted. Councillor Brian Drayson. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I've read the planning enforcement plan, which seemed to be more like a policy than a plan, with some difficulty, as I feel that its layout, wording and the format is not easily readable, perhaps echoed by some of the comments that's already been made. I feel that, although it is not a strict constitutional requirement, such a policy should be reviewed by members other than just the Cabinet. There is currently a working group from the Planning Committee looking at the layout, wording and format of the local plan prior to its release for consultation. To me, a similar group should be looking at this document. I would hope that officers would welcome member input into such a public-facing document. While reading through it, I made some 47 comments in the margins, and I'll just mention a couple here. I don't think it's appropriate for RDC to include the picture of and the name of a man who fell foul of planning enforcement some 18 years ago in another area, and I'd love to see somewhere a mitigating and aggravating set of factors when enforcing. But I say I've found 47 of them, and I would ask, please, that the Cabinet consider referring this matter to a working group before forwarding it to full council for approval, or in fact I ask full council to do it. Thank you.
Right, thank you for those comments, Brian, and you noted. I'll invite Ben to respond to that, because there's no reason why we can't look at this in another way, but I think that this evening is a case of approval for a revised local plan, but presumably plans can be amended. You know, so therefore, if there are areas to assist Kemi and her team and to the reputation of the council, then there's every reason for us to be exploring that. And I'm sure this is something that I could invite Teresa to comment on and take forward. But did you want to say anything, Ben, in direct response to what's been said so far?
Thank you, Chair. I'm wholly supportive of the idea of something like an overview and scrutiny task and finish group to review this. I think it might be that this is a good starting point for that conversation, where I mean, it's up to members how we want to approach this. Either we want to recommend this one for approval and then seek to amend this, or whether or not we maintain the existing policy that's in place at the moment whilst we undertake a review of the revised proposal. That, I don't think, is significantly different either way. But I think a task and finish group through the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, with the chairman here, should be, and the vice chair, should they be amenable to such a proposal, I think would be a good way forward to get under the skin of it, bring on these comments, and have member involvement at the early detail stage would be a good approach.
Thank you. Is that something, Paul, that you would accept?
Yes, it would be, Chairman. Councillor Colleen some months ago sort of requested we look at a task and finish group for enforcement. We had a member briefing from Kemi with regard to plan enforcement, and she did say at the time, she said, if you've got any questions, ask me, and I'll tell you all about the problems. Things have moved forward in that we've now got a few months ago we put a new funding in for updating the computer system, which would make life a lot easier, because that was taking tons of time to upload stuff. Councillor Colleen has obviously changed her position from scrutiny to the member for planning. So we sort of had an email conversation over Christmas, and I said, well, you're in charge now. I'll leave it to you to deal with it, and if you want a scrutiny, we can do it. So we're easy on a scrutiny, and if Councillor Colleen says, yeah, do a scrutiny or look at it closely, we're happy to do it. Thank you.
This seems a very good start position for that. I think that, you know, from the officer's point of view, there's a need to have it clear and understanding so what we're able to do, and then it's got to be effective. Teresa?
Yes, we certainly had the conversation, and one of the things we said was, well, there was a training event in December, and I don't think we had much feedback from the training event, so there seemed to be an acceptance that actually everybody was happy with the way it was going forward, which is why the paper was put to today. But clearly now committee members have looked and decided it isn't what they want as a document, so maybe we need to go back to the idea of a task and finish group.
Okay, so are we going to propose this plan and adopt this plan, which is then a working document that we can then, with the assistance of our scrutiny colleagues, put some form of work group, task group together, whatever, in order to come to something that will be workable? Ben?
I think, for the sake of ease, I think maybe if cabinet members are happy to, we'll take this paper away with your comments and seek to do that without having to go through the process, because I think this has got to be a full council decision, and to save that process happening, we can take it away. We can enforce by the existing enforcement plan. We've been doing it for years. Yeah, okay. It's not going to be the end of the world for a few months whilst we undertake that process.
Okay, so that is a proposal Teresa will support to vote on in a moment, but Hazel.
Thank you, Chair. In case there are any enforcement officers listening in, I just want to acknowledge that any time I have had a case or had to be in touch with them, they respond almost immediately to me and get the job done. So, and I know that they're very, very stretched. But I just wanted to acknowledge what they do.
Okay, yep, thank you for putting that there. So are we going to have a recommendation that what's the wording that we're going to... Lorna?
That a task and finish group is set up to look at the development of the local enforcement plan.
Thank you for that. You're happy with that, Teresa? And you propose that?
Yes.
And someone can second that? And we can vote on that. That's the way forward. It's unanimous.
Are we voting?
Yep. Jolly good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Let's move on. That was number 10. And number 11 is here. So this is the Members' Allowance Scheme report that was undertaken by the Independent Remuneration Panel on the recommendations of our current allowance scheme. Personally, I believe that the work put into this was very, very thorough and reflected various meetings that members had with the panel. My own particular view, which I would like to share, is that the recommendation from Cabinet is that members should decide not to increase under the current financial situation. There is a small budget there of savings, but in view of the fact that it is a members' allowance scheme, I feel this could come forward to full council so that members can vote on it. I think that's appropriate, with a recommendation that we thank the Independent Remuneration Panel for the work they put in the report that they completed, but I feel it's appropriate at this current time that we can leave things as they are, but subject to full council's acknowledgement. If we're happy with that, I'd like to move that as a case, and is somebody like to second that? Yeah, and those in favour? And that's unanimous, so that we can leave that and go forward on. Recommended. Thank you very much for that. Where do we go next? Is it number 12 now? Okay, fine. Rory's not here. Joe, this is your report. Are you going to lead on that report, please? Or is Caroline?
No, I can take this one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the annual review of the housing, homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. As members will be familiar with receiving this report, I hope, by now. We review it annually to look at the action plan and update you all on how things are proceeding and progressing. To give you some highlights from the report, I think it was, I wanted to highlight, the report has the detail, of course, but I wanted to highlight a few bits that I felt were particularly pertinent. We have secured 19 additional properties during 2023 for the use of as temporary accommodation, taking the total to 42, with a further 5 under offer, which will be completed by March this year, setting us towards our, approximately 50 units that we initially foresaw securing within the current capital allowance for new temporary accommodation, which is really positive. 100 new tenancies we're on track to secure under our other tenant finder landlord incentive scheme, which is really positive, and another opportunity to promote the Rother Tenant Finder scheme to anyone listening who has property which they want to lease or to let directly and responsibly. We've also recruited a number of new prevention officers through our Spend to Save initiatives that we have internally, and managed to increase our homelessness prevention from 59 last year to on track to 95 this year, which is a 61% increase, which is really positive. Also worth putting in a shout, I think, in terms of the new strategy, the new strategic approach that we're taking, and the task and finish group that members will be familiar with, that's coming through the overview and scrutiny committee. That's about to start and get underway in the next few weeks and months. We've also got a homelessness active service review of our homelessness services being conducted by the charity Shelter, which will inform a new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy, separate strategy from the housing development strategy that we want to conceive of, and focus more on our development ambitions. Beyond that, we're also looking at an East Sussex-wide strategy that we're commissioning collaboratively with Public Health and the other 5 housing district boroughs in East Sussex. So really positive progress there in that sense as well. And that's trying to integrate ourselves more effectively with the health and social care systems and criminal justice systems. So we have a more cohesive and collaborative approach to homelessness and homelessness prevention. I did want to put into context and just raise some, coming down the line really, in terms of the wider economic challenges that we've seen in the last 12 months or so, with rising inflation, an increased cost in borrowing, and challenges, the impact that's had on our ability to bring forward and new accommodation through the market, and the experience our own housing company has had, for example, at Blackfriars. That is beginning to have a noticeable effect on the number of new property coming forward, and therefore new affordable homes coming forward as part of the policy compliant element of most developments. So in particular, we're seeing an increase in viability concerns coming forward from developers, and we've lost so far about 34 units of affordable accommodation, social housing, affordable housing, due to viability constraints and viability concerns because of those wider economic challenges. We're also seeing our main RP registered provider in Southern Housing has announced a significantly reduced development programme beyond this year, which will see a fall from over 1,000 properties a year to 250 properties a year in their programme. So, yeah, not looking great in terms of the next upcoming years, and that's our principal route to getting people out of, a lot of people out of temporary accommodation who can't live in the private sector. We are blessed with North Bexhill, as we know, and that will help us, and those sites coming forward through those various Vistry developments presently is really positive. So not all bad news by a long chalk, and we are still supporting various landowners to promote the land to the west of those developments as well. So some reasons to be cheerful, but the wider challenges I wanted to make explicit to members, which will be coming forward through the task and finish group process in more detail. But happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. I think there's some good news in here. There's real progress in here. Can I just ask one question? How many households are we supporting through temporary accommodation?
Presently, I think it's around the 150 mark. Live data.
More closer to 170 today.
Right, okay. Are there any questions of Joe on this? No? Councillor Barnes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Christine Bayliss.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say well done, really, to the team. I think when you look at other authorities, they are like just beginning the journey of purchasing their own temporary accommodation. We're well ahead of game in terms of doing that, and we would be in serious doo-doos if we hadn't have done what we did 3 or 4 years ago, I think, in terms of buying housing. There is a couple of questions. On paragraph 15, you talked about Cemetery Lodge, or as I like to call it, Parker Place. Now, I know that Councillor Coleman in Sidley and myself in Central, I probably get a sort of housing case once a week, possibly once a fortnight, where there just isn't places to put people, and it's very heartbreaking at times. And I had hoped. I know there's only 6 units of accommodation at Parker Place, but is there anything we can do to support the Bexhill Community Land Trust in order to sort of progress this? Because I know that the developer, unfortunately, they were ready to go with it. We've done the planning application and approved that. So is there anything that we can do to support them to get those 6 units of accommodation up and running?
Joe, please.
Yeah, I mean, beyond what we're already doing to support them through grant, by awarding them grant to bring forward where they've got to through our community-led housing scheme, which is government grant, which we've focused on this. We're actively engaged with Action in Rural Sussex, who run our community-led housing hub, and I met with them and our enablement officer only a few weeks ago, and they're the chair of the CLT and with Action in Rural Sussex to try and get our heads around the viability challenges they're facing. But as I described in my main summary, that the cost of materials, the cost of labour, the cost of borrowing have all increased, and property prices have remained fairly stagnant, if not fallen. And so it speaks for itself, really. And that was a marginal scheme. It's a really good scheme. It's trying to restore an existing asset in the lodge, but that's quite an expensive way of doing things. And therefore, they're up against the same challenges the rest of the market are up against. So we are continuing to support them and look at what options are available, but it's not positive at the moment, unfortunately.
Thanks for that, Joe. Was there an issue with regard to cost of putting in the roadway into that site, where the costs needed to either be covered by the development or that we would have to find them?
There is the current delegation does have a nominal land value attached to it. I won't go into the figures, but some of that was associated with some of the cost. But the cost of putting in the road has been covered by the council, essentially written off by the council now, I think, from many years ago. But Ben may not, he was more intimately involved at the time. But there is the intention of recouping something through the land value. But again, that's the sort of thing we're looking at. We're a bit commercially sensitive, but that's the sort of thing we're looking at.
Okay, that's fine. Any other questions? Captain Sam, I mentioned Captain Sam. You don't even look like a Captain Sam, I'm sorry, forgive me. It's getting late.
It seems every item that comes forward at the moment has a sort of bleak national context behind it, and you can get very depressed very easily about it. And I think whatever government is next in government needs to change that. But I think it's really important to say that how proud I think we all are of our housing and homelessness team here at Rother. I think whenever people ask, what do you do at Rother? What's the point of Rother District Council? Don't they? I always point to the housing and homelessness team. I mean, we really are punching well above our weight, considering we're quite a small district authority. From purchasing temporary accommodation before a lot of authorities did to all the proactive work that Joe's and his team are doing. I think it is a real sort of jewel in our crown. You almost wish we didn't need a sort of homelessness team, but I'm sure they'll be needed for quite a long time to come, and so I'm glad we've got the one we've got, because they are a real asset to us.
Yep, thank you for those comments, Sam. Terry, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Really echoing what Christine and Sam have said, but to summarise, up and down the country we've got authorities saying, we haven't got enough houses, give us more money, give us more land, we can't cope. Now, at no point have you heard any of the housing team say we can't cope. They come with alternative strategies, ways they are thinking about overcoming the problem, and that is a real change from some of the more doctrinaire councils up and down the country who are just saying, well, it's not our fault, we can't cope. No, we recognise the problem. It doesn't mean we're finding it easy, and the housing team are working very hard. But, as I say, every time you ask a question, it's not we can't, it's difficult, but here's what we're trying to do. And I think that runs through the whole strategy, and as both Sam and Christine have said, I think that we really need to applaud our team. Thank you.
You're right. And at a recent meeting with MP Sally Ann Hart, she acknowledged that we have identified the solutions and we're moving forward on it. So, that's an observation which I think is important for us to identify, that we have got a solution there and we're working towards that, and that makes us all feel very, very positive. So thank you, Joe, and your team. Councillor Barnes. John?
I think it's quite important to say that on priority 2, rough sleeping, homelessness, meeting housing aspirations through our temporary accommodation purchases, all of that is going very well. Because there is a task and finish group on housing, I don't propose to say very much tonight, but there are one aspect worries me, and that is the way that some of the housing associations, Southern is a particular example, are selling off some of their older properties, which not only removes them from rental, but means they're not getting modernised and brought up to date. And they're doing this to not spend money on environmental considerations. That, I think, is to be regretted. I think we do need to move fairly rapidly to phase 2 of our temporary accommodation purchases, because that clearly has been a successful policy. It probably needs to be extended. We put in 8 million to begin with. It's probably time to have a second phase. But really, our housing department does deserve every congratulation for the work they're doing in very difficult circumstances. And Terry Byrne, I think, put this very well. Thank you.
Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question for Joe, really. I'm looking down at the 1,000 houses hopefully to be built over the next 15 years, and obviously 200 of them are going to be on the Blackfriars site. As far as I'm aware, they're not affordable homes. So can you tell me how that's going to help the homelessness and people on the housing list?
There you are, Joe.
Thank you. Our strategy of 1,000 homes is being reviewed as part of the Task and Finish group. Also approach, strategically to how we develop housing. With Blackfriars specifically, that's the present position with the viability of it, as I understand it, from the housing company who are leading that development. It is regrettable that the viability isn't there in terms of how bringing that site forward. But as I think I've been at pains to describe in a range of other contexts, the economic situation in which we find ourselves is meaning that the houses are costing as much, if not more to build than they did a year ago, and they're not worth any more. So I don't think, I can make the same point again, but I think it speaks for itself that this current situation economically is really challenging. So we are losing across other developments as well, other developers coming forward with viability concerns, removing the affordable housing, which is, again, really painfully regrettable, but that's the market forces that we leave our housing supply approach as a nation to, and that, but the rights and wrongs of that are not for me to describe, but if we're going to rely on the market and market forces to bring forward affordable accommodation, it's always going to be vulnerable to market forces. So there we are.
Thank you, Joe. I hope that helps your question, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay, this report, which is to be moved, I've turned over the page. Okay, so approve the revised housing, homeless and rough sleeping strategy improvement plan. And thank you, Joe, and your team for bringing this together. And I think we all... And that's moved by Councillor Terry Byrne and seconded by Councillor J1, whoever. Yep, that's fine. We've got plenty of second. Those in favour, that's unanimous. And thank you, Joe, and your team for bringing this together. So we move on to 13.
Oh, no, sorry. 13.
Yeah, 13, yeah. The Delaware Pavilion Funding Agreement.
Chair, redeclare and move.
Thank you,
Redeclare
Catherine.
and move.
Thank you, Hazel. I'll lead on this report, which is the review of the The current review of the Delaware Pavilion funding agreement, which perhaps follows on from Councillor Osborne's mention that one or two members had raised things with him, which comes to an end in March 2024 and seek approval to extend agreement for 3 years until April 2027 at a maximum annual cost to the Council of £536,139 to include an annual review of the level of funding awarded. The reason for the recommendation is to allow the Delaware Trust to focus its fundraising on the current Levelling Up funded improvement project, which is a significant amount of work involved, and be in a strong position to manage the building following completion of the capital project. The Delaware is obviously, as we all know, is a key cultural asset within the wider Sussex region, attracting significantly over a third of a million visitors to Bexhill annually. Members will be familiar with the importance of the Delaware Pavilion to the wider tourism economy of Rother, which draws in over 2.5 million of revenue to the district every year and provides work for 129 staff at the Delaware. Members are aware that the Council is presently facing facing a revenue deficit and will have to make significant reductions to its operational budgets over the next 5 years. And all its funding commitments must remain sustainable over the long term. In February 23, the Delaware were awarded a £17.2 million grant from the Levelling Up Fund, following a partnership bid with ourselves to support the redevelopment of the building. RDC's funding typically accounts for around 15% of the organisation's annual turnover and is key to securing the ongoing match funding at sustained levels. The LOVE project is expected to be completed by the summer of 2026, during which time the Council's support of the Delaware Pavilion Trust needs to remain as consistent as possible. The benefits of LOVE funding to the Trust's future operating capacity is detailed within the report. In short, the LOVE project looks to enhance the commercial opportunities and help the Trust create a new business model going forward. The Delaware is a main tourist attraction, and it's where we rather have been investing into the tourism industry in the 1066 area, if you like. The options considered by officers are detailed within the report. The option recommended is to extend the agreement for 3 years until April 2027 to include an annual review to the maximum level of funding awarded at the current rate of £536,139 a year. This agreement will allow the Council to review the Trust's business plan annually and continue to set a sustainable annual funding amount. I'd like to stress that the Rother District Council and the Delaware have a very close working relationship. I'd like to suggest that we change the annual Delaware Pavilion report to full council to an all members briefing and then referred to overview and scrutiny. This is a significant commitment by the Council, and I think it's only right that all members have an opportunity of exploring, and I think that it's said that the Chief Executive of the Delaware would welcome that opportunity to do so. So I'd like to recommend that we, along the lines that we continue the funding for 3 years with the annual review. Thank you. And can we vote on that, please? Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any points that anybody wanted to raise post that vote of approval? If not, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Joe, for the work that you've done on this. Exclusion of press and public following item includes material which is exempt from publication by virtue of Part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and is recommended that the press and public be excluded. The relevant paragraph of Section 12 indicating the nature of the exempt information is stated after the item and is reproduced in full at the end of the agenda. In all circumstances, each case it is considered that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. What happens with regards to members online? They can remain. Okay, thank you for that.
So can we stop the live feed?
We stop the live feed. So you're not on live. Okay. We haven't got there yet. Okay, well, thank you for members attending this evening and those that have tuned in remotely, and that concludes this evening's meeting of Cabinet at something like, Ben, remind me of the time?
2026.
2026. Thank you very much indeed.